The federal government and the 36 state governors have finally agreed to sell 5 power plants under the National Integrated Power Project (NIPP) and use the proceeds to fund the 2023 budget. Parties in the deal reached the agreement last week after over 2 years of dispute and legal tussle as regards the sale of the NIPP plants being managed by the Niger Delta Power Holding Company, the NDPHC, owned by the federal, state and local government councils, is a power generation and distribution company that oversees the implementation of NIPPS. The Director General, Bureau of Public Enterprise, Alex Okoh, disclosed this in an interview with select journalists in Abuja on Tuesday. He also revealed that the United Bank for Africa had secured a core investor to acquire 60% stake in Abuja Electricity Distribution Company, while efforts were ongoing to get competent investors to repossess the majority shares in other 4 discos that were recently taken over by financial institutions. Well, let's chop this into digestible bits in order to assess its impact on the economy. And joining us to do that is Enebi Opalua, Senior Research Policy Analyst at Budget. Thank you for joining us, Enebi.
Thank you very much for having me on the show today. Nice to be here.
Yeah, compliments of the season to you. Well, we know that it had earlier been reported that in April 2021, the National Council on Privatization approved the adoption of a fast-track strategy to privatize the 5 power plants listed as Geregu, Omotosho, Olorunshogun, Calabar, Benini, Hobbo. But last month, the Nigeria Governors Forum, through their chairman, Governor Aminu Tambuwal of Sokoto State, rejected the sale of the power plants and headed to court to stop the move for the privatization by the federal government. What do you think changed? Because right now we see that they're now on the move to sell the power plants, and the government the federal, or rather the state governors are now in tandem with the federal government.
Okay, well, the way I see the development, there is little information about that has been disclosed about what agreement that was come to by both the federal and state governments. But based on the little information available, I think what the head of the Bureau of Public Enterprise said publicly was that they seem to have come to an understanding of how to generate value from the assets now rather than later. So perhaps initially the governors were skeptical about the reason to privatize now, or if there was a reason to do so. But I think I should just mention that the reason the NIPPS program was set up was to produce assets, power assets for the country to improve power generation, and then eventually privatize. So the goal of privatization was there from the beginning. It wasn't as if the federal government just decided to privatize now. From the onset of the program, that was the goal: to create assets, build power plants that are workable, and then transfer to partners to operate.
So apparently you're in support of the sale of the power plants.
Well, I would answer it this way, because in Nigeria there seems to be this binary system of should we privatize or should we not privatize, and most of it is based on the predetermined notion that public assets be managed by government. I would say that is not generally true in every case. The fact that some things will not work in Nigeria doesn't mean they don't work anywhere else. So I think one of the reasons we are in this situation is because of our unique system of government in terms of accountability, transparency, and competency in management. So first of all, my answer is, can governments manage public assets? Yes, there are evidences across the world where governments manage public assets. But however, can the Nigerian government, based on their current level of competencies, manage public assets? The answer to that question is here and there. So should we privatize? Yes, I would say we can. But to what extent, that depends on what we want to achieve as a country. a lot of experts have said that some have proposed that we shouldn't privatize 100%. Some said the government should have a particular stake. That seems to be doable.
All right, and maybe they're talking to us about the whole issue about selling the power plants to fund the 2023 budget. And of course, he's talked about the pros and the cons of privatizing these assets. But the question would be, some people who have argued for the privatization have said that most times when you leave properties or assets in the hands of the federal government, it's usually not well managed. It's usually mismanaged, and people get paid salaries, and of course there is no accountability, so to speak, in that regard. And that if private organizations can take over, that it would help the management do better, because they would be in for business, of course, and they would not want to be at a loss. And so this is the argument that some people have put forward, especially in support of this sale. NIPP, are you back with us?
Yes, I'm back with you. Yes. So
yeah, go ahead.
So first of all, let's get this straight. The fact that we privatize an asset doesn't mean it's going to work efficiently. I think the 2013 privatization has proved that already. You just simply privatize doesn't mean that it automatically works. There are certain things, steps or actions that have to be put in place, certain conditions that will be fulfilled financially, business-wise. There are a lot of things that need to be put in place, and then the government cannot just rest its oars. They have to be on their toes to ensure that the business environment, the regulatory system is functional to ensure that those assets, that sector works optimally. So privatization is not a magic wand that just means things will work. That is not the case. There are several assets that are, let's say, wasting away across the country, and yes, if you can let's say make them much more efficient, or you can generate value by allowing people to operate them and give you revenue, then why not? If that's a better way to go, then we should go ahead and do it rather than let them waste away. There are several assets that are just lying down fallow. Some belongs to agencies that are no longer operational and have been defunct, and so it doesn't make sense to retain those assets and just keep incurring costs on them. Yes, we should privatize them, we should let them off, but not in a way that promotes inefficiency or rent seeking. It has to be done in a way that optimal value is obtained from these assets.
Well said. But let's look at some of the organizations that have been privatized in the past. For instance, we have NIPP, which was privatized to PHC. And how effective has that privatization been? Because a lot of people who are against this privatization have been using that as leverage to say that privatization isn't really the way to go.
Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, the power assets, particularly the generating companies and distribution companies, were privatized in 2013. And as we can see today, we've not generated the value or the result that we intended would happen. I think one of the problems we had initially was managing public expectations. When the governments want to carry out a policy, sometimes they oversell. And then they say when we privatize, this will happen, we become efficient, power generation will increase, efficiency will increase, there will be no power failure. So sometimes they oversell and just neglect reality. But by the time you do that, you run into problems with the public when things don't work out as you promised it would. Let me also say that Nigeria is not the only country where privatization of assets have failed. There are several examples. Time will not allow me to go into all of them right now, but there are certain areas and different sectors, not necessarily power sector, but where privatization has been carried out in some countries, and then the government had to reverse those privatization schemes. So if we come back to Nigeria and look at power assets, like I said earlier, since 2013 till now, we still do not have optimal benefits. But let us not just bundle the entire power sector as well. We have the generating companies, the transmission companies, and the distribution companies. If you look at the discos, I think since 2013, they've really increased capacity by 19%. If the records are right, and then if you look at the transmission company, which is still under the control of government, as at 20,000 or so. No, as at 2015, before the Buhari administration, transmission capacity was around 5,000 megawatts nationwide. As of 2019, under the leadership of the former Minister of Power, they were able to expand transmission capacity from 5,000 to almost 8,000 megawatts. So this was done by the government. And then when you look at generating companies under the Obasanjo era, when the NIPPs came on board, they were able to increase generating capacity from somewhere around 5,000. That was under the military era to.
All right, I think we lost connection there, but of course, analyzing all of the issues surrounding the sale of the NIPPS, the power plants under the NIPPS program. And of course, while we're still talking about all of this, we know that President Muhammadu Buhari has asked the Senate to approve 819.5 billion naira supplementary budget for the 2022 fiscal year to fix infrastructure destroyed by flood. Enebe, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so let's wrap up with the fact that President Muhammadu Buhari, in the midst of all this, has now presented 819.5 billion naira supplementary budget to the National Assembly for approval to fix infrastructure destroyed by flood. How do you think this would affect the economy? We're still looking at the fact that they are trying to fund the budget. But now, of course, this would increase the deficit to 8.17 trillion naira. All right. Sadly, we'll have to leave it there because of time. But thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning, Enebe Opaluwa, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Well, after the break, we'll bring you stories or updates from the global oil markets. Please stay with us.